To provide Pakistanis with cheap yet practical excavators, they import many near-scrap machines from abroad at a low price of around 20,000. With the exceptional repair skills of the Pakistani brothers, these machines are refurbished and ready for resale. Today, the repair involves an excavator with a severely cracked chassis. While we weren't paying attention, the team had already disassembled the machine. The mechanic was cleaning out the turntable, with dirty, black grease all over it. Just seeing it would make anyone cringe. It takes some serious courage, and I truly admire the mechanic for cleaning it by hand. After roughly cleaning the grease, they tied the center with a rope, started the crane, and flipped the machine over to access the cracked part at the bottom for repairs. Such a project is impossible for 1 or 2 people to complete. It requires teamwork. Now we can see the spots around the wheel gauge where, due to the machine's age, the edges of the holes on both sides have severely cracked. The mechanic used tools and a hammer to loosen the bolts holding the counterweights. After loosening the bolts, they lifted the heavy counterweights, each weighing about 100 pounds. One less bowl of rice at a meal and they wouldn't have the strength to carry them. Next, they used a welding torch to cut away the cracked edges of the steel plate. All they needed was to replace it with a new steel plate. Though replacing the plate sounds simple, the disassembly and reassembly process is an enormous task, requiring both time and effort. More impressively, they even had to use a crane. Thanks to the mechanic's tireless efforts, the cracked steel plate was finally removed. One of the mechanics started cutting the new steel plate. In Pakistan, no repair is complete without a hammer and a welding torch. They truly deserve an Oscar of the repair world. The mechanic used a grinder to smooth out the uneven edges. Another mechanic placed the newly cut steel plate onto the press. Given the limited equipment, there were no precise measurements. The entire process was based on the mechanic's experience and feel. It's truly a case of, when technology is lacking, skill takes over. After pressing the steel plate, they placed it onto the chassis and adjusted it into the correct position for welding. The welding skills here are top-notch, and the mechanics are very experienced and meticulous in their work. After confirming the measurements, another mechanic welded each seam that needed to be done. Next, they positioned the counterweights, using the holes in the counterweights to align the chassis holes. This process requires careful measurements with a ruler to ensure accuracy. Any misalignment could affect the machine's performance. After positioning the counterweights, they tack welded the holes to prevent movement. Using a string, they measured the center point and marked the distances, making adjustments where necessary. After securing the edges with welding, they drilled holes for the bolts. One mechanic was ready with water to cool the drill quickly. Once the holes were drilled, they threaded them with a tap. Finally, they reassembled the counterweights one by one, tightening them with tools. If these mechanics had lived in wartime, they could probably fix tanks. At this point, the chassis was fully repaired. Next, they